What's up and welcome back to another video. Have you ever wanted your model to move like this? But you don't want to give yourself a headache every time you're trying to be super expressive when you're using it? Well, boy do I have the solution for you. I'm going to show you how to make your model even more expressive using Vtube Studio. We're going to be using my small model as an example for today's video, but you can use whatever VTuber model that you have or want to improve the tracking on. Step 1 is to always put your camera in the exact same spot every time you're using your model. This helps because then you don't have to go back through and reset any of the settings that we're going to go through today. To get to the settings, we're going to need to double click the screen and then click on the pink cog. Once we're in the settings menu, we're going to want to navigate to our parameters. To do that, we're going to click on the little person with the cog up in the top corner. As we scroll down, you're going to see other settings like the movement config. I recommend you turn this off while we get the tracking set up. First things first, let's start with the head angles. For head angle X, you would want to look to your right, to the farthest possible spot on your screen where you think that you would actually be turning while using your model. And you're going to want to do the same thing for the left. If you feel like your model doesn't move enough, then you might want to turn down your parameters on the in setting to less than 30 and more than -30. Editing Blubber here, I actually want to take a moment to explain what your input and output values actually do. So your input is the number that is input from your tracking. So it's recording your face and then sending that into the program. The output is how the Live2D parameter is affected by your input. So by decreasing the values on your input, it takes less of your own movement to move your model farther distances. So if I were to decrease the amount of space between my angle X's maximum and minimum output, it would mean that my head turns a lot more when I move a lot shorter of a distance. Hopefully that helps. Be careful when messing around with your parameters because once you set it to a number that is too small, your model will stop moving after a certain point. It can only move between the values that were set by the Live2D animator. For angle Y, you'll just want to look up and look down. I recommend for this one, setting the up angle to be the highest point you would look when you normally nod your head. That way you can get a very nice nod when you want to say yes and no for things. Head angle Z is probably the one that I think people should mess with the most, just because it tends to be connected to a lot of different things, so you want to be able to get the most range of motion out of it without giving yourself a headache. I would say set the tilt to what's comfortable for you rather than what the input is. That way you can get the most shake out of it. For the eyes, I'm going to be introducing you to the smoothing setting. If you turn the smoothing all the way up, it increases the amount of time it takes to process the tracking inputs. So as you can see, my character's right eye, even though it's left, I rigged it backwards, leave me alone! My character's right eye will close much slower and open much slower than my left eye. I would say for every parameter, set your smoothing to a value that's comfortable for you, but also not too low because it gets very jittery the lower that it is. This model doesn't have eye smile, but if your model does, I would recommend setting your input parameter to start at a value higher than 0. That way your eyes aren't always smiling and squinting, and you can change in between smiling and not smiling. I'll use myself as an example. I have mine set to halfway, so that way when I start smiling, my eyes automatically change. Make sure your parameters are set to the same values, so that way your eyes don't look wonky. Thank you! Next up is the eyeball parameters. For these, you can leave them as is. I would recommend you can turn down the smoothing if you feel like they aren't tracking fast enough. I turned mine down to a smoothing level of 8. Disclaimer, I do have iPhone tracking, so if you don't have iPhone tracking, that's a-okay. You'll just have to change your settings to be a bit different than mine. Next up is the eyebrows. For this one, you're going to want to lightly raise your eyebrows and then set to that value. So for mine, it's 0.72. And then for the lower one, we're going to make an angry face. And for some people, you can just leave it at 0, but I'm going to put mine at 0.1. I really recommend resetting this parameter. That way you don't have to over-exaggerate your face to get the expression that you want to achieve. Next up is the mouth parameter. This one's probably my favorite by far. For this parameter, I recommend you turn that smoothing all the way down to 0. That way you can get the most expressive mouth you can possibly make. For my current model, I'm using VBridger, so I don't really have to do anything. But for this model, it's gonna need some tweaking. I like to start with mouth open as opposed to mouth smile, because that one, we're gonna introduce a brand new tool. For mouth open, we're gonna wanna go, ah, and see what it opens to. For mouth open, I like to set the value a lot lower than what the maximum is, because I will never, ever drop my jaw to the literal floor just to open my mouth all the way. I set my mouth parameter to 0.5, so that way it opens a bit more frequently. You can also set your mouth's movement to your voice volume if you connect your microphone to Vtube Studio. And that brings us into our next parameter that we're going to change, which is going to be our mouth smile. For mouth smile, I like to set it to voice frequency plus mouth smile. To do that, we're going to click on input, and we can just type in voice frequency plus mouth smile. Click on that. Next thing we have to do is actually set up the frequency parameters. To do that, we're going to click on the cog in the top left. Right below the mouse input config is the microphone settings. You're going to want to check use microphone, or else this will not work. Connect your microphone, then we're going to set up all these parameters. Volume gain has to do with the voice volume input, so since we're not using that, we don't need volume gain or volume cutoff. But if you do like to use those, I would highly recommend you tweak those so that you can get the most expressive mouth that you want. What we're going to be looking at though is frequency gain. So I have my frequency gain set pretty high. You can actually see the frequency gain sliding as I talk down at the bottom here on this bar. You want to make sure that it's actually sliding a lot when you're talking, as opposed to a little bit or not moving at all, or else the mouth shape won't change very much. Next we have the phenom. Phenom. We have the syllables. I spent so long trying to say that. I can't read. Help. So for this one, you would just make each syllable and figure out what kind of shape your mouth makes. So since my small pixel only has 6 different mouth shapes, it's kind of easy. So you can just click on them and they will switch between positive, negative, and neutral. So feel free to set that up in whatever way feels right to you. For blushing, I would set that up similar to I Smile, or just make it a toggle in general. Lastly, we're going to touch on body rotation. Now, since this model doesn't actually have any other body movements other than this, we're going to use my model as an example. As you can see, I have my body angle set up to the way that I move my face rather than the position that my face is in. So when I turn to the right, my chest moves to the right and to the left, but I can also invert them and create a completely different feel. So if we take my body Y, for example, which is me leaning back and leaning forward, if we invert it, it creates this effect. This looks so silly. That is so goofy. Don't you think? Do you think so? I think it's pretty goofy. It's pretty goofy. It's goofy. And the same can be done for your body X angle to create this effect. I think this one works better for sassier models, so that way if you're like trying to shun chat, be like, And that, my friends, is how you can change your settings in Vtube Studio to get the most out of your VTuber model. Happy VTubing, and also thank you so much to all the lovely people who have been supporting me recently with purchasing these small models that I've been working on. I've been really having a lot of fun working on them, and I wanted to say thank you in this video, and I really wanted to get this video out even though I have a ton of work to do. Thank you so much for supporting me. It means a lot to me. It's gonna take a while for me to get through all of them. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to follow me over on Twitch. I'm probably gonna try and stream some of them. I've been making a model a day for the last few days, so thank you so much for your support. I will see you guys all next time. Thank you so much.